Good morning, everyone. Please open your Bibles with me in the book of John chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. John chapter 8, verses 1 up to verse 1 up to verse 11. I'll read from the New American Standard Bible. It says here, "But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again into the temple, and all the temple were coming to him, temple people. And he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, 'Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act. Now in the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?' They were saying this, testing him so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. But when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, 'He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her.' Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. When they heard this, they began to go one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone and the woman, where she was in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, 'Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?' She said, 'No one, Lord.' And Jesus said, 'I do not condemn you either. Go. From now on, sin no more.' May the good Lord bless the reading of His Word. Somewhere in one of the barangays in the area of Sibugay, this is a true story, and I personally know the characters of this story that I'm about to tell you. There was a man who was raising chickens at his backyard. One night, when the whole family was already inside their bedroom for rest, they immediately heard that their chickens at the backyard were so noisy. And they observed further. The husband said, 'Let me observe further, because if the noise persists, I would go there and check.' But the noise stopped. And so they speculated that probably there was a dog that went astray in that area, or somebody just passed by, or there was an animal that happened to be there that was not supposed to be there. And he said, 'Okay, I'll just check tomorrow morning.' In the following morning, he woke up very early and he counted his chicken. He realized that there was one that is missing. And so he said, 'Tonight, if the same noise would occur, then I'm going to check it immediately.' The evening came, 7 o'clock. They were already finished with their dinner, and then they went inside the room at around 8. They put off the light, and a similar noise happened. And this time, he sneaked going to his backyard and suddenly put on the light, and there he saw a young boy holding one of his chickens. He grabbed the hand of the young boy, about 7-year-old that time, and he asked him, 'Were you here last night?' And the boy said, 'I wasn't here last night.' And he tried to interrogate further, and he realized that that was the same boy that was there last night. And so he told him, 'That chicken you are holding is mine.' And the boy cried before him and said, 'Sir, please forgive me.' And the man said, 'I will forgive you, but I don't like you to do it again. So tomorrow morning, I would like to tie the chicken that you are holding on your waist, and I would ask you to walk around the basketball court.' The boy agreed. The following morning, the boy was there, walking around the basketball court with the chicken tied on his waist. But we were surprised to see that the boy was just smiling. But as I was looking at the scenario, I said, really, human beings like us, we release forgiveness, and yet, despite the forgiveness that we release, somehow there is a desire within us to inflict pain or shame to someone who has caused a problem in our midst. No wonder in Visayan term we have the words such as mirisi. We have the words like gabaan. Did you hear those words in Visayan? Those words express the idea that because the person sinned, we want to inflict pain and shame also to him. And that's a reality that we are facing today. Is it just right to feel like that? Is it just right to do like that? This question will be answered when we go and delve into the text that we have read. And I want us to observe this time that there was a woman that was accused. And in the narrative, Jesus was in the temple. He was in the temple and naturally he was teaching. Temple was a place for education in those days. Today we have schools, universities, many schools surrounding us. Nearby schools you can name. But in those days, if you want to be educated, you have to go to Jerusalem, particularly to the temple. The system of education of the Jewish people back then was so either integrated inside their home. That is why when you look at Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 1 to 4, God told Moses, you write this and I want you to tell your people, my people, that this should be the statutes that they should teach to their children and to their children's children. In other words, you educate my people and you tell them to educate their children and their children's children. So in other words, he was instructing Moses to teach something to the Israelites that they should teach in the family. So the system of education is very embedded already within the home. Other than that, if you want to learn more, you have to go to synagogue. In the earlier years of our Lord, synagogues were already there. And then the communities would pay a rabbi to visit the synagogue and they would send their children to the synagogue so that they could learn more. And to those who are well off, they could send their children to the temple, to Jerusalem particularly, and have some rabbi to teach them. So the system of education is it's like that. In the home, in the synagogue, in the temple. Jesus was there teaching again, educating people, and because he was a unique person in his teachings, that is why many commentators would say that when not only commentators, but even the audience, they were wondering upon him, they were amazed about his teaching because he taught with authority in a very different sense compared to other teachers. So there were many people surrounding him every time he went to the temple to teach. And while there were many listening to him at that moment, there were scribes and Pharisees who came. Who were the scribes? The scribes were prominent people in those days. They were individuals who were so educated that they know how to write. Not everyone who can read back then can write. Because learning the skill of writing was so expensive back then. The papyrus where you would write was very expensive, that only the rich people can afford. The ink that you use for writing is also very expensive. That is why if you are a scribe, if you are a writer back then, you earn very much. Because there were only a few people who can write, though there were many who can read. The scribes were individuals who knew about the scriptures and they can write. That is why they were highly respected in the community. And another set of people that were mentioned here were the Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? Pharisees were also highly regarded in the community. Back then, if you are addressed as a Pharisee, then it's a pride that you should feel in the community. When your friend would tell you, I am a friend of a Pharisee, or this friend of mine is a Pharisee, meaning to say you are highly regarded. Of course, it's no longer highly regarded today, because if you look at your seatmate and tell that person next to you, you are a Pharisee, I think you will get a bad response from that person. Because the notion of a Pharisee this time is that you are a hypocrite, you are doing something that is against your teaching, you are someone who is not worth imitating. So never say that to your seatmate or to a friend, you're a Pharisee. But back then, Pharisees were having a high reputation. They were highly respected. So you see about these two sets of people coming to Jesus, the scribes and the Pharisees, highly respected individuals, and they were dragging a woman. What were they doing to this woman? They caught this woman in adultery, and they set her at the very center of the session, and then they accused her as somebody who is adulterous. Something that is so difficult to refute because according to their claim, she was caught doing the act. And then they asked Jesus, according to the law of Moses, this is the basis for the accusation now. According to the law of Moses, this woman should be stoned to death. When I read this portion of the passage, I asked the question, where was the man? Because if they were caught doing the act, then it should be the both of them. Because if you refer to the book of Moses, especially in the book of Leviticus, if there are people who are caught in the act doing adultery, both of them should be punished. But where was the man? Why was it only the woman that is mentioned here? We could give some possibilities, like probably when there were individuals who got in, then the man managed to escape because he's faster or quicker than the woman. Or probably the Pharisees and the Sadducees, Pharisees and the scribes just let him go. Because actually they were just interested about the woman, and in a deeper sense, their interest was not actually to pass judgment to the woman, but their interest was to create a dilemma wherein they could put Jesus Christ into it so that they could trap him. It's clear in the text. Look at that portion in verse 6. They were saying this, testing him so that they might have grounds to accuse him. In other words, more than the judgment that the woman would receive, the concern of these Pharisees and the scribes was that they wanted to put Jesus into a trap. And when it was happening already, they were expecting that the Lord would answer an either yes or no question. Because according to the law of Moses, they said, such a woman should be stoned to death. What can you say about this? So in the middle of the teaching session, they appeared and they presented the case and they told Jesus, what can you say about this situation? And then they were expecting for a yes or no answer. They were expecting for Jesus to say yes, that woman should be condemned. But if Jesus would say yes, then what happens is this. Jesus is contradicting with what he was teaching. Because he was known already that time as somebody who advocates justice, mercy, and grace. If he punishes the woman, if he condemns the woman, that somehow contradicts with his teachings. But if he also would say no, she should not be condemned, then he would be accused as somebody who violates the law of Moses. Are you seeing the dilemma here? That was the intention of the Pharisees and the scribes here. So they were expecting for a yes or no answer from him. But how did the Lord respond? Look at this response of Jesus. He just stooped down and then wrote something on the ground. And they persisted. They did not get the answer that they want. And in their persistence, Jesus said these words to them. He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw stone at her. Now, I want you to take note of the word sin. If the word sin is mentioned, therefore there is a basis for committing such a mistake. There is a law that is violated. In other words, if there is no law, there is no sin. Because there's nothing that you would violate. Just like, for example, you go to a street and then you made a U-turn, but there is no law that says there is no U-turn there, then you did not commit any mistake because there is no such a law such as that. But because there was a law violated, then there is a sin that is named here. And what was Jesus trying to tell among these Pharisees and scribes is that you came here accusing this woman that she violated a law of Moses. Now he is trying to bring this reality into their lives. Who among of you here did not commit any sin? In other words, he was saying, who among of you here did not violate the law of Moses? What was their response? Silence. Was there anybody among them who threw a stone? No one. They realized, or they were just reminded, that they were all guilty as far as the law of Moses is concerned. And the idea is that if you are guilty, then who among you, since all of you are guilty, then who among all of you has the right and authority to condemn this woman whom you accuse as somebody who's guilty based on the law? In other words, Jesus was trying to tell them that you don't have actually the authority to judge someone because you yourselves are guilty. And then when they heard this, what happened next? One after another, they left without saying anything. And the text is saying that from the oldest, and then the rest followed. The oldest left first. In their culture, the older the person is, he's perceived to be wiser. The more gray hair you have on your head, the wiser you are perceived by the community. Because you have a lot of experiences already. Meaning to say you have a lot of learnings in life already. And because of that, you are a wiser person. Kaya nga sabi ko, huwag magkumpiyansa sa maraming uban na tao. Kasi wais yan. In their culture, you are perceived to be a wise person. And these wise people perceived that they were all guilty. That is why they left without saying anything, without throwing any stone to the woman. And Jesus told her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" Did no one condemn you? No one condemned you because they are also guilty. As I was pondering on this, I said, yes, the adulterous woman is no different than every one of us today. You and I are violators of the law. You and I disappointed God at one point in our lives. You and I committed mistakes, and if we would be asked to count those mistakes that we made, I think we could not number them anymore. There are too many of them. Too many to count with our fingers. And we are no different from this adulterous woman. We are guilty. But if you flip it on the other side, are we no different also with the Pharisees and the scribes? That even if we know that we are guilty, we are still willing to point at our fingers at other people whom we see as guilty, and we say, that person is guilty. Magabaan ra gyud na someday. That person committed a sin. Makabalos ra gyud ko ana niya. We are no different from the Pharisees and the scribes because we point finger at each other even if we are all guilty after all before the eyes of God. The adulterous woman was guilty. The scribes, the Pharisees, and everyone else who were listening to Jesus were all guilty. There was only one person who was not guilty in the temple that time. And that is Jesus himself. Because as far as the law of Moses is concerned, he did not violate anything about it. There were accusations that he violated some of the laws, but according to the spirit of the law, he never violated anything. That is why Jesus said, "I did not come to abolish the law, but I came to fulfill it." So he was the embodiment of the laws of Moses. He lived according to it, and there was no mistake found in him. That is why he is not guilty. And because he is not guilty, he is the only person who has the authority to judge someone who is guilty. But when he looked at the woman, he asked her, "Is there anyone who condemned you? Is there no one who stoned you? You are guilty, woman." The Pharisees and the scribes were all guilty. Everyone else is guilty. But Jesus said to her, "I will condemn you. I will not condemn you either. Even if I have the right to condemn you, woman. I will not condemn you. Hallelujah. What a beautiful picture of someone who is perfect, someone who is holy, someone who never violated anything would look at a sinner like you and me and say, I will not condemn you. Instead, he told the woman, go. You receive my forgiveness, woman. You receive my cleansing. And I want you to go bearing that forgiveness in your heart, bearing that mercy, bearing that grace that I have given to you. Go and sin no more. Go and propagate that forgiveness, that mercy, that grace that I have given to you. Respond to the people around you with grace and mercy. Learn to forgive others also, because at first you were just forgiven and you were given mercy and you were given grace. Who are we not to give mercy and grace? Who are we not to forgive other people if we have just been forgiven after all? Today we would have a communion celebration. And that gives us a reminder that we are all given forgiveness, mercy, and grace. And after the service, you would be released and you will go back to the community where you belong. You will go back to your workplace, attend your classes again, meet with people, mingle with friends, go back home with your family. And I think God is telling you, go. I have forgiven you. Forgive others. Deal with them with mercy and grace, because that's how I have dealt with you. It is my prayer and desire that we would learn to live our lives in relation not only to God, but in relation to the people surrounding us, where mercy and grace and forgiveness become so evident that people would concretely know and experience the gospel of Jesus through our living. This is the prayer that I have in my heart, and this is the message of God for us today. Good morning, and the Lord bless us all.